Hello, everyone. Welcome to the France 24 debate. I'm François Picard. If you're looking for that tacky Christmas jumper to provide a dose of light relief from 2020, well, you've probably come to the wrong place. Besides the pandemic, we still have a planet to save. The problem? Cheap clothes with a short shelf life. It's called fast fashion. Since World War II, what we wear has grown cheaper and cheaper, while coming from further and further away. We'll ask how big a carbon footprint and social cost, also how TikTok and Instagram have further fed that buying frenzy. The world's favorite sport ain't football, it's shopping. We'll ask our panel how that pastime will evolve now, how shopping has perhaps changed for good during this pandemic, and how it'll shape our taste in what we wear. On that score, what's true for fast fashion is also true for the high halls of haute couture and prêt-à-porter. From the cotton fields of Mali and the sweatshops of Southeast Asia to the catwalks of Paris and consumers' closets, how to look great and also feel great at the same time. Today in the France 24 debate, we're looking at this age of fast fashion. Joining us, journalist Dana Thomas, the author of Fashionopolis, The Price of Fast Fashion and the Future of Clothes. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Also in the French capital, fashion and art historian Haley Edwards Dujardin. Welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you.
They still make clothes in Paris. We can prove it. From the suburb of Ivry-sur-Seine, Anne Viry is the owner of Anne Viry Fashions. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
The France 24 debate, where you can join the conversation all year on Facebook and Twitter. Hashtag F24debate. Dana Thomas, again, remind us, what is fast fashion?
Fast fashion is clothes that are made at lightning speed and delivered to thousands of stores worldwide. They're sourced in factories where people are paid half a living wage, and they're sold for a fraction of what they should cost, making the owners of those companies wildly, wildly rich. The owner of Zara, Mr. Ortega, is number 3 richest person in the world after Jeff Bezos and I'm not sure who number 2 is, and I think Bill Gates, and then and the others, Uniqlo, the owners of Uniqlo, the owners of H&M, they're all in the top 50 of Forbes billionaires list. They make buckets and buckets of money because we buy buckets and buckets of these clothes. And they run through the clothes through these stores so quickly. They do the drops every week. So we're addicted to going into the stores and seeing what's there to buy, new, at super cheap prices.
Yeah, and there were clear red flags that the world could no longer ignore in these past years. 2018, Burberry admitted to burning bags, clothes, and perfume worth millions. The calculus was that it was more profitable to just get rid of the stuff than discounting its unsold stock and thus reducing the exclusivity of its brand. And then, even more shocking, the 2013 collapse of the Rana Plaza factory in Bangladesh's capital. When cracks in the structure appeared on the eve of the disaster and the building was evacuated, owners shrugged it off and sent everyone back to work. More than 1,100 workers lost their lives, Dana.
Yes, absolutely. I've been there, and I spoke to survivors of Rana Plaza, and their lives are devastated. There were thousands of survivors as well, and they suffer from PTSD. They have permanent injuries, and these brands did not step up, the ones that were producing there, and help the victims whatsoever. They didn't give them any money. They didn't give them any support. And some of them had to actually go back and work in the garment district after having been crushed for days under the rubble of the building when it collapsed. At the time that the building collapsed, the Bangladesh worker was earning $68 a month. That was half a living wage, which is what economists calculate we need to house, clothe, and feed our families. And when it collapsed, it was already known to be a dangerous building. And major brands, investigators found, were sourcing there. Brands like Walmart. Walmart denied any knowledge of it, saying that they were subcontracted. But H&M is the largest producer in Bangladesh of clothing, and clothing is the #1 export of Bangladesh. And while H&M didn't have anything in Rana Plaza is not a one-off story. There are factories like that all over the place. As I saw when I visited there's entire boulevards of sweatshops like Rana Plaza.
Has much changed in 7 years?
Yes and no. They brands and they put together a binding accord to up the safety standards of legitimate factories. And so now wires are put up in the ceiling and there's fire extinguishers and there are team leaders in case there's a fire. And I visited one factory where they even have a cistern on the property. So if the place does go up in flames, they can put out the fire before waiting for the fire department to arrive. But there's still thousands and thousands of sweatshops that are off the radar that are still producing. As I saw myself, I visited one 10 minutes after arriving in Bangladesh. I was in a sweatshop watching workers paid, I don't know how little, standing barefoot, thin, working in the most deplorable circumstances I've ever seen in my life, with broken windows and trash and slop on the walls. And they were making jeans for a brand that I'd heard of.
Haley Edwards Dujardin, the fact that people working in the textile industry are exploited is nothing new. In fact, the Industrial Revolution started in Manchester and Liverpool with sweatshops there. Do you think that there's a reckoning taking place now?
Well, I hope so. There is indeed, especially with this crisis and the sanitary situation we've been facing, people have been more aware of their habits and especially their consuming habits. And like you've just said, these disasters and human and social disasters that have happened in the past years that we cannot ignore anymore. But in a more global way and vision, I think, fast fashion is still very active. Like Dana was saying, brands are still and their owners are still earning tons and tons of money thanks to fast fashion. Us consumers are still very eager to buy €2 T-shirts. So there is a reckoning, but is there a change, a true change? I can't yet see it, but I do hope it will happen. I mean, it has to happen.
Has to happen. We saw 2020 was a landmark year for lots of reasons. One bellwether, the last haute couture fashion show by Jean-Paul Gaultier, the iconic French designer, had already quit ready to wear. He's 68 years old. Gaultier, though, says he's got plenty going on, but there's a definite sense that he's a little worn down by this frenzy to always produce more.
I've done lots of collections, and maybe it's changed a little bit. You do have to make way for the younger generation too. The world is changing, and fashion is too. The whole system of fashion has changed.
There was in that interview that the sense a little bit, and I'll put it to you, Anne-Vili, that there is this pressure to put out more, and it's these bargain brands that are sort of pressuring the whole of the industry.
Yes, it's especially true for very big fast fashion brand and also high couture. Myself, I have a small brand that I design, produce, and sell myself in my own stores. So I'm what it's called now low fashion, means in the normal width. So we have 2 collections, one spring-summer and one fall-winter. That should be like that because we don't have 20 seasons. So yes, it's had a pressure, but I always stayed in my own quantities and small production also.
Were you ever tempted to grow bigger than you could?
Not so much because I'm completely financial independent. So I don't have the possibility for that too, but it's a good way in a way. So no, but now I'm producing even differently for next season because I have to adapt to all the situation. Would we be locked down again? What happened? So it's easier for a small brand to change, I think. And we already, I'm producing only in Europe with European fabric. I know all my suppliers. So when the scale is small, you know where it's come from. I'm visiting myself, the factory. and I'm very involved of that, so try to be as much as I can responsible.
You talk about having to anticipate what's coming up the following year. There's this big trade show that takes place twice a year near Paris Airport, Charles de Gaulle Airport, called Première Vision, First Visions.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
Dana mentions it in her book, Anne. It's where big and small meet, you might say.
It's really so strange for us not to have Première Vision, that it's the time that you see all the fabric for the next season. You know, we always a year in advance. And so now we don't have that. So we meet directly the supplier. And now, for example, for next winter, now in mid-December, normally I just had to finish all my next winter collection. And for this year, in 2020, after the pandemic, I stopped everything, waiting what's happened. And my objective is to make the new winter collection only with recycled fabrics, to use what I have already. And finally, this pandemic have changed, you know, the way of producing it. That's good, even if it's very complicated to do it.
When you listen to Anne Viry describe, and just to be clear, you have 4 shops, I believe, 2 in Paris and 2 in Brooklyn?
Yeah. Exactly. One in Brooklyn I had to close, and the other one I really look for a partner because it's really complicated now to manage a store from so far, and I cannot go there. So, yeah. So I have 2 my own store in Paris and 1 in Brooklyn.
So listening to Anne's story, Dana Thomas, is Anne kind of an outlier, a niche, somebody who's able to control from the fabrics all the way to the store, what she does on a small scale, or is that the future?
It's both. She is niche for the moment, but it is picking up steam. The slow fashion movement has been around for about 20 years, but it's been very small. And it is picking up steam as people in the fashion industry are just growing so tired, just literally exhausted by the pace and scale that fast fashion has imported to pret-a-porter and haute couture and everything. Everybody's on the same path. And when John Galliano started at Dior, he was doing 4 collections a year. When he left, he was doing 32. And somebody at Dior now said they do 1 a week. You know, that's the speed of fast fashion, and it's at Dior. So you can see that they're just tired, they're worn out, and they want to slow it down. So this is happening, and there are designers who are leaving fashion, like Jean-Paul Gaultier, and just stopping. There are some who are leaving the big machine and starting their own small brands. And then there's this whole fantastic young generation of millennials and Gen Xers who are just coming out of their fashion schools and saying, I don't want to work for the big corporate brand. I want to control everything and do it sustainably, use organic cotton and have traceability so we can see where the wool came from for my jumpers. And they're really I get an email a day at least from some young startup saying, I'm trying to beat this horrible system by doing things right. And look at what we're doing. It's very hopeful. There is hope.
Haley Edwards Dujardin, if you take the long view on clothes, I mean, most people until the 20th century made their own clothes effectively, and we've gone to this in a bit with same way with food, where it's just become more and more, and it's gotten cheaper and cheaper. When you listen to what Dana's saying, does that fit a pendulum swing, or if you look at history?
Well, yes. I mean, like you said, fashion was mostly a sort of domestic activity, handmade activity, until the Industrial Revolution and confection arrived in the 19th century. And then we had a flash forward to ready-to-wear post-Second World War. But yes, I think people are fed up and people want to return to basics and want to know where their sweater or their dress was made, by whom, in which conditions, the quality. I think we've lost completely the value of things. Like I mean, like I said earlier, we're so used to paying T-shirts €2 that when we see a T-shirt that costs €50, we're shocked. But it should be the other way around. We should be shocked by a €2 T-shirt and think it's quite normal to pay an organic cotton T-shirt €50, because we tend to think that work, handwork, craftsmanship, products, materials have no worth anymore. Everything's become so worthless. And so, yes, I think, well, I mean, we're all very hopeful, and I think things are changing. And as Dana was saying, and Anna is also a wonderful example, there are more and more young designers who are opening the gates of the future of fashion in a very positive way.
What do you say to viewers Haley, who might be thinking when they listen to this discussion, oh, this is a conversation among rich people, among people who can afford expensive clothes?
Well, I think that's it's an ongoing story. You were talking about food. I think it's the same thing when we say that some families can only afford to buy prepared industrial meals rather than fresh vegetables. I think it's not true. I think that in the long term, you always gain from buying proper products, because if you just buy €2 T-shirts, then they'll use very quickly and you'll have to throw them away and buy another one and then another one. Whereas if you just spend a little more money at least once, well, at least you can keep it longer and you don't have to pay again for it. So, yes, it's very easy to say, that we're privileged, which probably we are, of course. But I think that we must look at the bigger picture. And I think that in the long term, people can only benefit from having a more respectful and a better quality.
And Vili, how do you convince shoppers that yes, it's a little expensive when you buy my clothes, but you can keep them for longer?
Of course. First of all, I'm so happy that you are speaking about that, because it's so important. We are throwing so many clothes and we don't need 20 T-shirts at least for 1 month. It's terrible. The industry of fashion is the second worst industry regarding pollution, I mean. So it's so important, and this pandemic have really changed things. So now I'm back in my store a lot, working 7 days on 7 and speaking, explaining, and there is a very big vague of support of clients that really happy to help, know that when they buy something, it's almost a politic act to say, okay, I'm buying to you. I see the designer, you are a real human being. I'm presenting my team also. In Instagram, I'm now showing how is made this coat and where it's come from. And I feel a huge solidarity of people that want also to have small independent store continue. Because now everywhere you're going, you see the same exact design. Everybody is look the same, and it's not what we want. So it's the beginning, but I hope and I think it's going to grow.
And is Instagram your friend or your enemy, Anne? Because you mentioned how you use it to show off what you're doing behind the scenes, but also others can look at your fashions and go, hey, I'm going to copy that.
Yeah, but let's copy, It's not so easy to make a real good clothes with beautiful fabric. It's a lot of work behind that. And so I've been copied a lot from Zara, it's very easy. They are going so fast, they are so strong. But you've been speaking about Gautier. He said, when somebody copies you, it's a good sign. So I just take it like that and go ahead.
Do all the designers that you spoke to for your book, Dana, have that view when it comes to how social media influences good or bad of the industry?
No, there are some who are greatly, greatly frustrated by being ripped off. Because not only are they ripped off, they're ripped off faster than they can put out the clothes themselves. I write about Mary Katransu, the British designer, and I follow a collection of hers from beginning to the runway to the store. And, she has this beautiful collection with these things that she worked on for months, and she developed and designed the fabrics and the prints. And as we were walking out of the show, one of the players at one of the major online shopping stores, you know, Zara or H&M or Topshop is already working on that butterfly print, and they're going to have it in the store next week. And Mary Katransu wasn't going to have it in her store for another 6 months because she had to go through her whole cycle of presenting it to buyers and then getting the orders and then sending it to the factory and then sending it to the stores. But fast fashion is so fast, they can take the ideas directly from Instagram. Instagram for them is like a market study. They can see how many likes each look got from a fashion show and say, we need to put that one into production. And they don't even have to pay for that market research. So it's a bit of a problem for designers unless they just go, well, that's the way it is. And the little black dress that we put out is a little black dress like we all did since Coco Chanel came up with it. So that's, you know, like it and lump it. But no, it's for some designers, it's sort of a necessary evil. It's a way to reach their consumers, and at the same time, it's a way to get ripped off.
Dana, I got to admit, I was a little bit spooked at one point reading your book. You broach the subject of blue jeans, and you say you're probably wearing a pair as you're reading this, and sure enough, I was. So I had to stare behind, see if there was maybe a camera or something. But the blue jean, it's interesting. You talk about how it really is sort of a parable of what's happened in the greater fashion industry, and one brand in particular, Levi Strauss, which loses its way, but there's a little bit of redemption at the end for it.
Yes. You know, blue jeans are the most popular garment outside of, you know, underwear and socks ever made. And they were, at any given moment of the day, half the planet is wearing blue jeans. That's why I had, you know, it was a 50-50 chance you were wearing them when you were reading the book. And you go, what? How can that be? But stand on the street corner and look around you next time. And sure enough, half the people will be wearing blue jeans. And they were developed to be the most sustainable product ever. Garment. You know, the rivets weren't there for decorative reasons. They were to hold the seams together, because these were pants made for miners crawling around in the dirt during the gold rush in California. And they passed them down from miner to miner. When you struck gold, then you passed your jeans down to the next guy. And you're like, I'm out of here, but here are my good luck jeans. And now we burn through them. The average American owns 7 pairs of jeans, one for every day of the week. We produce 6 billion pairs of jeans every year now. And it's not the cleanest industry. It's one of the dirtiest in the fashion industry. The synthetic indigo dye contains formaldehyde and cyanide. And then there are factories that just let this wash straight into riverways and waterways. I saw a dead river in Vietnam next to an old jeans plant where they had just been dumping the dye for years until the river died and it was thick and black like tar. And then the factory moved because the river was dead and they couldn't, and it was nasty. So it's a rough business, but there is hope. There's a great company in Spain that's doing distressing for us with lasers as opposed to watching people do it by hand and inhaling all the fibers. They also wash our jeans for us with a machine that uses just little than a glass of water per pair of jeans, as opposed to gallons and gallons and gallons and gallons of water just to get our jeans soft so we don't have to break them in ourselves anymore. It's cleaning up slowly the industry, and there's a rise of the return of natural indigo and organic cotton, which is fantastic. And once you've seen a pair of blue jeans dyed with natural indigo, especially if it's organic cotton, you never want to go back to the industrial version again. It's so beautiful. It's a bit like buying a farm egg after getting one from one of those industrial farms, getting one from a free-range farmer or from your own hen house. You go, right, completely different product. And they last forever. If you buy good
Are they very
jeans,
expensive?
they should last forever.
Are they very expensive?
They're more expensive than the cheap jeans, to be sure. But, you know, cheap clothes are so inexpensive today. They're 1/5 the price that we were paying in 1960. And yet we're dedicating 1/3 the amount of money that we did in 1960 to clothes. So basically, when we paid $100 for clothes in 1960, we're paying $30 today, and we're getting 5 times as many clothes. We've been conditioned to believe that these low prices are the normal prices. But it means if it's too good to be true, it is too good to be true, that price, because everyone along the supply chain has not been paid what they're worth.
Haley Edwards Dujardin, you're the author of a book on on the color blue, and you start your book in ancient Egypt and the use of indigo and dyes. Are blue jeans something you think about?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Well, my book was really about history of art, so it was the artistic pigments that I looked at rather than fashion. But yes, I think jeans are a great example, and there are. I think I'm right when I say that they are the most polluting garment that we know today, and it's incredible, as Dana was saying, the story behind. Like, we've come from this working garment to this cheap, popular piece of clothing that everyone wears. And yes, once again, we always bring this back to price and to the cost. Yes, a proper good pair of jeans cost a little more money, but it's worth it. And we have to. I think the problem in this whole story is not cost or poverty. It's over consumerism. We just need to stop buying so much, and once we reduce our shopping habits, well, we'll just find that it's normal to pay a certain price. I think we just buy too much. That's the major problem, the major issue.
And we are always demanding something that is new. The influential founder of the Hyères Fashion Festival on the French Riviera, Jean-Pierre Blanc, admits he wasn't convinced that recycling clothes could be a thing.
For a while, the problem with recycling was that it was quite ugly. It didn't inspire desire. The big difference here, in particular with regard to the accessories that won prizes, is that you really want to wear them.
Do you use recycled materials, Anvidi?
Yes, I do. Of course. And but for example, this winter I had made some cashmere sweater that are made only with old cashmere sweater that been thrown away, and so they reproduce a new fiber. We do that. So of course it's even more expensive because it's a lot of work, but the quality, the color are super beautiful. And as you said before, finally a clothes that you can wear 10 years, it's much cheaper than one you can wear 6 months. And that's the thing. And when it's recycled, finally the quality is sometimes better, and also you produce less. So it's what we have to do, and fast now, really. Not fast fashion, fast reaction.
Are there materials that lend themselves to recycling better than others?
Yes, the good one, of course. When you have already something cheap, so you cannot cheat with fabrics. That's the beginning of the material.
All right.
I'm working from the fabrics. It's first of all, yeah.
There are recycled materials, and then there's secondhand clothes with a growing market for sales, not just in charity shops, but in places like supermarkets and department stores. Let's listen.
Aujourd'hui, ce qui pousse les consommateurs sur le marché de la seconde main, c'est à la fois d'aller chercher du prix plus économique pour 72%, également aussi de moins gaspiller. Et du coup, il y a cet engouement depuis 2-3 ans au niveau du développement durable, au niveau des enjeux sociétaux. On a envie aussi de faire un peu mieux pour la planète et puis éventuellement de faire un peu moins cher. Et c'est pour ça qu'il y a ce marché qui est en pleine croissance depuis 2 ans.
Dana Thomas, France isn't as big as the UK when it comes to charity shops, but we are seeing more and more of these secondhand clothes being sold. How's that going?
It's going really well, as I'm finding out with my 20-year-old. And every time I look at her, I say, "What is that?" And she goes, "Oh, it's new, but I only paid £2 for it," or €2 for it. I go, "Oh, okay." There's the Kilo store, which is, the idea of it, I think, is a disaster and great at the same time, where you can buy a kilo of clothes and you just get what you want. You get what you get, and it's for a couple of euros. But the fact that we have so many leftovers that you're buying it by the kilo, it says a lot about how we're over consuming. The average garment today is worn 7 times before it's thrown away. And so we're just burning through clothes. Like fast food, we burn through fast fashion. And it's kind of like fast food too, where we're hungry an hour later. And so that's what's happening. So we are seeing the rise of charity shops. We're seeing a rise of especially online secondhand, like Depop, which is a very popular website for teenagers and college students, where they post their old fast fashion and they sell their old fast fashion. My 20-year-old's about to walk across to a place to pick up a dress that she bought that was a fast fashion dress, but it's recycled. She's buying somebody's used Zara dress today. So I was like, okay, giving it extra life, that's better. That's better than throwing it in the landfill. You have to realize that 2/3 of our clothes contain polyester, which is essentially plastic. And plastic doesn't biodegrade, as we're seeing in the oceans and the landfills. So that means that all these clothes that we're heaving into the bin and into the landfill are not biodegrading. They're with us forever and ever. We have to think, long game when we go shopping. Does it cost more to dry clean that than it does to replace it? If it does, you shouldn't buy it.
And you mentioned your daughter shopping online, and of course, COVID has gotten the better of big department stores like JCPenney and Neiman Marcus in the U.S., Debenhams in the U.K. facing extinction. How will the digital acceleration we've seen over the past year affect that is one question. And when you mentioned, Dana, the fact that this buying and selling is taking place online, is it peer-to-peer, or you mentioned at the outset the head of Zara being one of the richest men in the world is in fact Jeff Bezos, the world's biggest fashion mogul now, in effect.
Exactly. Well, the peer-to-peer thing is happening, but there's things like Vestiaire Collective and The Real, where you can clean out your closet, which a lot of us have done during the lockdowns, and just post everything. You send it off to them and they sell it for you, which has been a big business. And yes, and then Amazon has moved into fashion. And it was said when I was writing my book 2 years ago that within 2 years, Amazon would be the biggest fashion retailer in the world. And it's happened. I think it happened less than 2 years. They're moving in. They're not only selling other people's clothes, they're developing and selling their own. They just hired a friend of mine, Sally Singer, from formerly the digital editor of Vogue, to run the fashion department of Amazon. That tells you about their ambition of how they see the future of fashion online.
Yeah, you were, Anvili, ruining a few years back the department stores that brought in knockoff cheap imports. Is the biggest threat to you nowadays these digital giants?
Sorry, I didn't understand well your question.
Is the biggest threat to your business model big digital companies like that?
Yeah. It's difficult for me to compare because I'm a so small niche, like you said. It's true that now the e-shop is working better and I'm selling there. And also my Japanese wholesale client is selling more online, I think, than in the store. Of course, the online will grow, but in a different way. We need more human, and people are so happy now that the store are open back, to just have a real advice of a human being and to take time for yourself in front of a mirror, and we need humanity. So it's of course, online will grow, and in a second time, we need so much to be social. So my answer is so between the two things.
And let me ask you, Anne, because Dana mentioned in her book attending a Stella McCartney fashion show here in Paris back in 2017, one with a twist in that there was no fabric made from animals in her show. Not only was it sustainable, but it was also vegan, you might say. Your reaction to that?
Yeah. I don't agree with that because, for example, wool, cashmere, silk, and especially wool, for example, all the vegans don't want to use that. And you don't kill the animal, you take the wool in a good way. It depends also which suppliers. Some do it very bad, but most of them said it's something a bit technical, but it's called anti-muism. It means that the animal have been tendre in a good
Sheer,
way.
yeah.
But it's a normal thing. Yeah, it's a normal thing. And no, I do think that we need natural fabrics and natural things from the animal, but in a respect of the animal himself, of course.
Haley Edwards Dujardin.
But for me, it's too extreme.
Haley Edwards Dujardin. Again, it's this conversation that's just beginning now. Another thing, and we'll mention it in conclusion. I'll put it to you first. What about renting clothes? Your thoughts on that?
I'm not a huge fan of renting. I actually really like secondhand and vintage. I'm wearing a vintage dress right now. But renting to me just perpetuates this idea that we always need something new. It's just another way of pretending and just hiding the problem under the rug or the carpet. So we don't need to rent clothing. We have enough in our wardrobes. I think what's interesting, if we really want to have a positive outset, is that just let's all be more creative and have more imagination. Let's bring fashion back to its essence by making it fun, playful, extravagant, eccentric, personal, and just play with what we already have and be conscious not to buy too much, not to be anxious and stressed by the idea that we always have to present ourselves wearing something different. And we can wear something different every time, but with what we already have, we can associate and layer things differently. And I think, a bit more creativity and fun will be very helpful to all of us in the way we dress.
Dana Thomas, you describe in the conclusion of your book renting a high fashion outfit and being a little surprised when you feeling a bit sad when you hand it back in, when you send it back in.
It was sort of like a breakup. I'd so fallen in love with it. But at the same time, I haven't missed it since then. It's not in my wardrobe. And I found that I've since rented for special occasions, and that kind of dressing, it's a bit like being movie stars. When you have to walk a red carpet, we don't get to do it when we're not movie stars very often. And you don't necessarily want to go drop 3,000 euros on some fabulous gown to walk the red carpet at the Cannes Film Festival or the Venice Film Festival or wherever else you have to go for some one-off event. But you can rent, and I did that for an event in Cannes, and I rented a dress for 250 euros that would have set me back several thousand. I wore it for the night. I felt like Cinderella. And then I returned it the next day and somebody else got joy out of it another time. One of the largest growing markets in the rental business is wedding dresses. And that's exactly the same idea. I mean, we buy these wedding dresses for gobs and gobs of money. We wear them once, we put them in a box and they go in the attic. I wore my mother's, but I'm a rarity, I think, in that sense. So that dress got 2 wears out of it. But the idea that you can rent the wedding dress and then somebody else can have joy in it too, and that joy gets passed down, I think is really good juju, and it's better for the planet as well.
Better for the planet as well. Your thoughts on this, Anvili, on your outfits, your dresses, your coats, seeing them being rented. What are your thoughts on that idea?
Why not? I will be happy that somebody that can afford to have it by own can have it for a small moment. I think it's a good idea. After I'm designing my clothes really with the idea that it's for long. So sometimes it's even a problem because I'm showing my collection and the client said, but I have my own coat from you from 10 years ago and it is just perfect. So no, I think it's a good idea, of course, especially for a big occasion, for dresses or something that you are not wearing all the time. But everything is possible, and in the way we're producing less, that's the more important, to respect our planet.
Producing less, the collections that you have. So you have twice a year. You put out a collection, no more. When's the next one coming out?
So the next one, it's difficult. The summer 21 that we just launched the production, so I have produced less, even if I'm already, in small quantities. But And then I will see if it's 6 months. Normally, a collection of a summer collection is from February to end of August. But we don't know if the next months will be 6 or 4 or another lockdown. So I'm producing less and be more adaptable to the situation. I'm not working again like a year in advance with all the collection going together, but more small item following the weather, the new situation, the clients. So I'm very close to people, and that's what I love of my job. It's to make things that are living with the people.
Dana Thomas, last question for you then. The pandemic for fashion, listening to Anne, it's a bit like football season. It's had to be pushed back and staggered. And will that have a lasting impact, do you think?
Yes, I do, because the designers have complained about the pace that they found so exhausting. Several of them have written and signed manifestos saying, we're not going to keep doing this. Now that we've had a proper break and time off and we got our lives back, we'd like to keep our lives and we'd like to stop overproducing. And we're really fed up with seeing our clothes go into the incinerator when they don't sell because there's too many clothes out there. So there is a movement towards fewer collections, fewer fashion shows, which are a gigantic expense, and just continue to push consumption on the consumer, addiction to shopping. And they're using recycled materials. They're rethinking how much they produce. They're saying, maybe we're not going to do 100 items, we're going to do 60. There's been a complete rethink of the business simply because the designers themselves are fed up with being on that treadmill.
And if there was one fashion item that says 2020, what would it be?
Sweatpants.
Sweatpants.
No.
Is that what you think, Haley Edwards Dujardin?
Unfortunately, yes. Clearly, yes, sweatpants.
And Vili, this is not music to your ears, is it?
No. No, please wear nice clothes, even if you're home behind a screen. It's important for yourself also. Sweatpants are terrible. I don't like them.
Sweatpants are terrible. That will be the final word. I want to thank you so much, Anne Vili, for joining us. I want to thank as well Haley Edwards Dujardin, Dana Thomas. Thank you for joining us here for this special edition of the France 24 debate.